Stacey and Eve, would you like to take it away?
Sure, I'm going to put our slides up, Stacey, and we're going to try and stick to 10 minutes, but it might be tough because we're talking about a 2-year project, which is the Greater Manchester Digital Project. So I'm going to pass over to Stacey for the first bit.
Hello everyone, so just a quick introduction. So I'm Stacey, and I'm here with Eve. So we're from Oldham College, however, just after the pandemic and when we all went back to teach on site again, me and Eve were asked to work on a project with Greater Manchester Colleges Group. So the Greater Manchester Colleges Group is a group of 10 colleges, so oh no, Eve's put 9 colleges, sorry, in Greater Manchester, who come together and collaborate on what is working, why it's working, and where it's working. And the main focus and reasoning behind starting this type of project was because when we was in the pandemic and we had to go to online teaching, it was very new to a lot of people. So when we come back, it was all about understanding what has had an impact on students in a positive way and what has worked, but how that has worked as well. Now, if you work in further education, you'll know that, you know, it's quite a diverse landscape. Students who are doing all different courses, different subjects, different levels, different understandings of the world. So it was a huge experiment to try and bring all that together. And it was all about improving practice within the college. So in a nutshell, what me and Eve did is we went to the online meetings with Claire Collins and Jill Scott, who's from the Manchester College, and we met with other digital and blended learning champions from other colleges. So we would meet up and then we go back and take new things into the college, but also think about, you know, what we could try that's new. One of the first things we did back in 2020 is we started the Let's Get Digital podcast series, which we did for that academic year. And what that enabled to do was speak to people in the college, but amplified that across the FE sector for other people to hear. So I think the beauty of the project as well was it wasn't just contained within Greater Manchester. Because of the platforms we've got, it allowed us to share it far and wide. Together case studies based on what staff were doing within their professional practice, and it enabled us to kind of build relationships with people, not just from our subject areas but from the whole college and from external communities as well. Do you want to talk about this experiment bit? So at the college, we used Google Suite. So that was the workspace that we invested in for us to be able to teach effectively online. So it included things like the Google Classroom, Docs, Sheets, Jamboards, etc. But we also wanted to have a look at it in terms of the different types of students that we had. So Eve concentrated more on ESOL students, entry-level students and level 1 students, and I concentrated more on the level 2 and the level 3. And the only reason why we kind of split it like that is because we had access to different kinds of tutors in those areas, being advanced practitioners as well. Our key focus areas, I think for us, was the digital inclusion. That was so important, but also understanding how we can use our digital platforms to enable and develop independent study and formative assessment and feedback in order to improve grades, get higher grades, and, you know, accommodate students for, you know, if they wasn't able to make it into college, and things like that. Eve's going to talk just over what the supported experiment was and how that works within the college, and then we're going to give you some small examples of what we did. Hi,
sorry about that. I was on mute before when you tried to hand over to me. So yeah, in the second year of the project, we were asked to use a supported experiments model to kind of drive forward digital practice in the college. So this comes from Jeff Petty, and I've done a little drawing of it because slightly obsessed with drawings at the moment, as Chloe will know. So the idea was to work with teachers across the college and to sort of go through a coaching cycle with them. So we would start by talking to the teacher and talking about their context, what they did at the moment, and then where the digital could maybe fit into their present practice, and how that would fit into their kind of pedagogical goals. We'd then make a plan together collaboratively, and the member of teaching staff would go off and try something in their class. So it might be a particular platform or a particular way of using the existing things we had in the Google Suite. And then that was followed up regularly with coaching conversations where we talk about how it went, any issues. And me and Stacey were kind of there as well for technical support. So if people were a bit nervous about trying something new, sorry, I don't know if this is me, I can hear interference. I don't know if the sound's okay for everyone else. Okay,
I think everyone's on mute now, except for me and you. I'm talking, but everyone's on mute now, Eve.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. Yeah, so we'd had those kind of, the supported part of the experiment is that Stacey and I were always there as a sounding board for that member of staff who was trying out something new. And then we encouraged them to kind of share and celebrate what they were doing. So they came to some of our conferences and shared practice, and we gave them some sort of visual, well, I gave the staff I was working with a visual template to record what they'd done and how it had gone down with students and what they thought were the successes. And then the idea is then that leads to kind of sharing with colleagues and in faculties, so that faculties can start to kind of embed that new practice into their work. So that was the cycle we followed with these supported experiments. So I'm going to talk through a couple of examples from ESOL, and then Stacey's going to talk through some examples from business. So in ESOL, I worked with a level 1 tutor, and we had a look at Century Tech, which is an AI platform for improving maths and English skills. So the level 1 students all had individual targets for things they needed to improve. And with Century, it gives them a diagnostic test, and then it gives them learning on whichever areas have been identified that they need to practice more. And it sort of adapts to the students, so they take their own pathway through the programme. And if they do well at something, then it will stop giving them questions about that. And if they make mistakes, it'll give them little instructional videos and then give them more practice with the things that they're struggling with more. And then I worked with a tutor who had ESOL starters, so our complete beginners in ESOL, people who speak very little English, and she did some work on basic digital skills. And then I did some work with my own group, so I teach ESOL, and this year I was teaching Entry 3, so I did some work on kind of independent learning and sending them online homework through their email. So I tried out various different platforms, including WordWall, TeacherMade and Book Widgets. So WordWall's kind of games, and TeacherMade and Book Widgets are more like kind of online worksheets, but unlike a worksheet, you can add audio, so they could do listening and speaking within those. So this is just a little bit of feedback from the students. I might just let you read it out. So this is what they thought about Century Tech. So essentially, we just got lots of positive feedback, and students noticed the fact that it was personalised to them, and they liked the fact that it kind of gave them extra practice on the things that they needed to practice. And then This is the visual template that I gave to the tutors I was working with. So this is the notes from my colleague who was teaching beginners. So she used our Chromebooks and she did some work on sending emails. Right, I know I'm running out of time, so I'll make sure I have time to hand over to Stacey. But essentially, the students loved the lesson. She had a few reflections on how it could have gone better. And that's exactly why I had this sheet. So it gave us a basis to have a chat and a discussion about what to do in the next lesson and how to adapt what she was doing. And then this was some of the feedback I got from my students about the online homework. And the themes really were, they loved the fact, firstly, that they could do it on their phones. Secondly, that they could repeat activities again and again. And they liked the fact that they could listen to things as many times as they wanted. When we do listening in class, that's kind of constrained by how many times a teacher plays something. And they liked the fact that it was automatically marked and they got instant feedback. So yeah, all of the stuff in ESOL went down really well. And I will pass over to Stacey for the last minute or two to talk about what she did.
Thank you, Eve. So in the experiments where I kind of worked, I worked with someone from caring professions and a couple of people in business and someone else in sport. But I think one of the main things was that come out of some of the conversations is that when students leave the physical classroom, they go home and everything, you know, just goes out of their head, or they lose the paper. But we had this technology and invested money into it, and you know, it was fantastic. So what we did was we looked at how we could put the physical classroom into a digital world, and it wasn't anything fancy that we did. It wasn't, you know, introducing loads of new tools. It was making use of what we already had and trying to keep it as simple as possible for the students. So just on this picture here, I've just got some examples of what you might see in the physical classroom. So for example, the work that the students would do on the whiteboard, you know, that doesn't have to be rubbed off and forgotten about forever. All it took was a few photographs and then popped them on to Google Classroom, so that when students were coming to do their assignment, they had the whiteboard pictures there. Also, something that I used to do with students is what they should have in front of them when they're completing their assignments. So, you know, I used to set it up in the classroom, take a picture, and then put that onto the classroom so that they could have a look and set up their workspace the same. It sounds dead simple, but the students loved having things like this. Could you just go to the next slide, please, Steve? So on this particular slide, I made them a digital toolbox, because something else that we found with the Google Classroom is that when you're constantly uploading stuff over several weeks, you end up with lists, and even if you've got stuff in folders, it looks overwhelming. And for me as a teacher, if I'm struggling to find stuff on there, imagine the students when they are coming to do their assignment. So through speaking to students and asking what they wanted and what would work for them, and talking to other staff members, we trialed the digital toolbox, and all this was a set of Google slides with hyperlinks in. So you'd have like 4 or 5 slides, and you'd have a slide with the feedback on that they've got from previous assessments, and then anything that they need in terms of resources. So each of the pictures had a link to what they would need for that particular criteria, and always at the end was like the academic skills section. So that would be stuff to do with the command verbs, the referencing kits, the assignment briefs, and any further reading or links that they could make reference to. So that really helped the students. Could you go to the next slide, please, Eve? We also used the Google Classroom as well for exam prep. So a big area that always seems to not be focused on is exam, you know, how to revise, how to answer a question, because you've got a set amount of time to teach the exam content. And it always seems very rushed. So what I did was I put extra classes on. We had the tools to do online teaching as well as in the classroom. So I used to put on an extra class every Thursday, and we'd keep everything in one place in preparation for that exam. And it was just that link between the classroom and their home as well, instead of it being completely separate types of classrooms. Also, because we was doing the exam preparation classes online, we could record them, and students, if they couldn't make it because they were at work, they could just tune into it whenever they wanted. Could you go to the next slide, please, Eve? So the final slide is the student voice. So on this slide, you'll just see some feedback from students. Now, the supported experiments and working with other staff has been really, really beneficial. However, the student voice, it was just as important in all of this. Asking students, you know, what is it that you need? What's going to help you? And there has been an improvement in those grades, but are grades the most important thing, or is the most important thing that the student, you know, has that sense of belonging? They know where to find things without, you know, the anxiety of thinking, oh, I can't find it on the Google Classroom. Just streamlining things and making things more accessible for students has been a big hit with them, I think. And then once the student feels, you know, in a safe place with, you know, where they can find their resources, etc., high grades will follow, pass rates will follow. But I think first and foremost, it's making sure that student is comfortable both in the classroom and out of the classroom, and they've got that connection. So when they're at home, they're not just feeling, you know, that they're on their own and you know, they can't find anything. Also, these things can be reused. So for staff in the new academic year, they can still use all the stuff that we've created, all the toolboxes. So hopefully it will save some time for teachers as well. I'm sorry if that was rushed.
Don't worry at all, Stacey. That was fantastic. Thank you and Eve both for presenting and sharing. Like you say, that was what, a 2-year project, slimmed down into 10 minutes. So well done.